Welcome. For those of you who've not attended a Women in Residential Property event before, Women in Residential Property was set up around about 7 or 8 years ago now. We are a pan-industry community, and what I mean by that is that we have members spanning estate agency, conveyancing, development, residential block management, mortgage lending, lettings. I'm sure I've missed some groups out, but we are very deliberately pan profession because that is how we encourage collaboration and encourage knowledge sharing and the sharing of insight. We sponsor a fantastic charity called the Girls Network. So our in-person events, we will always run a prize draw for the Girls Network. If you'd like to know more about them, please have a look at their website. But they provide mentoring and support for young women from some of the most disadvantaged backgrounds. Really, really important. It always distresses me that careers advice is probably even poorer now than it was when I was at school about 40 years ago. Girls Network does amazing work. Do look up what they're doing. Few dates for your diary about what we've got coming up. Second Thursday of every month, so that's this Thursday for May. We have our free of charge online coffee morning. We have also got a fantastic in-person event coming up in Cardiff, our first ever event in Wales, and also in Bristol. More details on our website, www.womeninresidentialproperty.co.uk. These slides are moving very, very fast, as you've all probably noticed. If you want to get involved in WiRP, we are welcome ambassadors to join us, and we are always looking for sponsors. WiRP is run as largely by a team of volunteers, but also with fantastic support from Diane and the team at Today's Media. But the more sponsors we have, the more of these brilliant events we can do. I am going to ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves in a minute. We are delighted to be joined by Emily, Lynn and Laura. But before I do that, I just wanted to give a very quick roundup of what I read in the property industry press this morning. As always, we are at a particularly busy time, both in terms of regulation that is coming down the road, but also regulation many of us are already dealing with. The mortgage market has once again been returned to mayhem thanks to continuing economic uncertainty. We're seeing rates withdrawn, particularly for higher loan to value lending, concerns about affordability. King's speech tomorrow, what's going to be in it? Will it include regulation of property agents? What's going to be said around continuing reform of leasehold and indeed commonhold? I noticed today housing benefit costs are at an all-time high, and against that backdrop we are still not even vaguely close to building the new homes that we so desperately need. Many of you will be dealing with the Renters' Rights Act, which came into force on the 1st of May. Be really interested for any views in the comments about how that's playing out in practice. Lots of commentary in the press about a standoff between regulation, so introducing standards, and the need to build more homes. Certainly something that I've found coming up in conversation recently with civil servants, particularly in relation to the Building Safety Bill. We've also got Rightmove. There was a legal action announced against them on the 1st of April. I noticed that their share price today is 40% down on where it was last year. And for the first time, there's a lot of talk about the members of the public increasingly using AI to find homes they might be interested in buying rather than going to the portals. So lots going on, lots to talk about. I am now going to ask our panel to introduce themselves. Emily, if you could go first, please.
Thanks, Emma. I'm Emily Gray. I'm Operations Director at Burns Hamilton. We're a block management company operating on the South Coast. As well as my role as Operations Director, I'm a Fellow and Director of the Property Institute and an Honorary Consultant for the Federation of Private Residence Associations. So lots of hats on, but all around block management.
Thank you, Emily. And Laura?
Hi there, my name's Laura Palura. I'm a Senior Associate at Lee Bolton Monair Williams Solicitors. I deal with all aspects of leasehold enfranchisement matters and also advise clients on their property transactions with a specific focus on lease extensions and freehold acquisitions. And I'm very much looking forward to our discussion today to see what's happening across the residential sector. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Laura. And Lynn.
Thank you, Emma. My name's Lynn Hawkins. I'm a director at Survey Valuations and Surveys, which was formerly known as KFH Chartered Surveyors until we were acquired by the Adivo Group in October 2025. I am responsible for looking after the surveyors and the general day-to-day running of the survey team.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And for those of you who don't know me, Emma Vigus, I am the founder of WiRP. My day job is advising residential property companies on insurance and risk management. We're going to start with our first question. And Emily, I'm going to come to you on this. What's keeping you and your team busy at the moment?
It is a mix of two things, which I think probably affects everybody: people and legislation. So we obviously have all of our customers and our clients raising all their queries. We've seen a significant increase in the amount of queries, largely thanks to AI helping with queries. But the raft of legislation that we've seen with the introduction of the RICS 4th edition for service charge management, that's prompted a change to the TPI standards in how we operate. So we're having to adjust all our processes and look at our procedures to make sure that we're compliant with these new requirements. Then we've got the introduction of the residential personal emergency evacuation plans, PEEPs, and how we implement that across our buildings, talking to our clients about implementation of that. And all of the new legislation that we keep getting hit with. I've just done the TPI's course on common hold to get a little bit more familiar with what that will look like if it's going to become the norm for us, and how we might want to deal with that and address it. But just all these queries coming in from our leaseholders and our clients about what all this talk in the media about the changes in legislation means for them. Is it here now? Is it coming? What are we doing about it? And that's what's really keeping us busy.
Emily, just very quickly, picking up on that TPI course on common hold, is that still free of charge to do?
I think it's free until the end of May. So if you're a TPI member, get in quick. It's 8 modules. It walks you through kind of how common hold is different, but also the same as leasehold, because it's managing communal property. So whether that's under a leasehold tenure or a common hold tenure, there's a lot of similarities, but it's a lot more structured in its process. So just getting a really good understanding of that, I've found to be really beneficial.
It's a very, very, very good course. I've started to do it, and I know a couple of my colleagues have as well. So for anybody who is either a TPI member as a managing agent, or if you're a member as a supplier, do make the most of the opportunity to do it free of charge.
If I could just add, Emma, there's another TPI course that's free, which they've just released, which is their course for resident management company directors. And that's one if you've got, so Laura, you might have clients who are resident management company directors who want to know a little bit more about their role. They can go through this course, they can sign up, get their account, go through it and understand more about their responsibilities as well. And that's a free offering, which I certainly think will be helpful to us as managing agents so that we can have more of a partnership with our clients.
Yeah. Be great to see the day when everybody who's buying a leasehold property has to go through about an hour's awareness as well of what they're buying. Laura, what are you? What's keeping you and your team busy?
Yeah, so firstly, from the residential conveyancing side, we're finding that, I guess, with the knock-on effect of the potential reforms and questions, that nothing seems to be as straightforward as we'd like it to be. So lender requirements are changing, things keep having to move and satisfy along the way, making sure that properties remain marketable in the future. So we're trying to engage our sellers in particular earlier on in the process, trying to avoid these issues during the course of that transaction, and so we can actually have a smooth process the way through. So I guess that's an additional layer of what we're doing, which is keeping us busy on that residential front. But then in the enfranchisement, again, lots of conversations with clients now, how to proceed, managing expectations as best we can while the legislation is potentially changing. At the same time, we've also seen quite an increase in lease extension claims, certainly for leaseholders who are just getting a bit impatient now. They just want to get this done. They now need to remortgage or actually just have to sell.
Laura, I think you've gone on mute. Oh, you're back.
No, I haven't. Can you hear me?
Could everybody hear? Maybe it was just my computer.
No. Dropped out.
Oh, I'm not.
I can hear you now.
You're brilliant, Laura. Could you just repeat just the last 10? Just the last 10 seconds.
Okay, did we get up to where people need to now remortgage potentially?
Yes, so precisely, exactly there.
Oh, that's handy. I think there's something must have just blocked that. Okay, so yes, because people now may need to remortgage, they're up, or need to sell for various reasons, or moving or renters' rights, meaning that they actually want to just get rid of their properties. So we have seen an influx of those lease extension claims, regardless of what's happening in legislation. And at the same time, within that legislation, constantly keeping busy to make sure we're up to date. Even like I said, just yesterday, there was the announcement that this may be addressed in the King's Speech. So just being able to keep on top of all of that, and that is definitely keeping us busy. Yeah.
Lynn, it was really interesting to hear Laura mention their sort of changing lender requirements and also more complexity. I'm very conscious, Lynn, that the nature of how a mortgage valuation is done has changed a lot in the last decade because lenders increasingly use AVMs, automated valuation models. Does that mean, Lynn, that the properties that you're valuing are more complex? Do you do more sort of buy-to-let, for example, than you might have done a few years ago?
Yeah, that's correct, Emma. I think, we, over the last few years, a number of years now, we could see this coming in terms of where the lenders were going, that yes, they were going to use more automated models. So I suppose really we then decided that what are we going to do? So actually we went more into the specialist world. So, buy-to-lets and the leasehold properties, which is a little bit more challenging. But also it's, I suppose for our surveyors, it's about getting the information that they require up front. And I think that's, sort of moving forward, that's going to be the most important thing so that actually they can, assess the property and give an accurate valuation.
And that move to more upfront information at the start of the process is part of the latest set of recommendations that have come out from, for example, the Home Buying and Selling Council. Lynn, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think, if everybody's informed about the property, right from the beginning, it just makes the process a lot easier. And to be able to sort of maybe cut down on transaction times, but also not having the post-valuation queries that the surveyors end up having, later on down the line.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And Lynn, just for anybody listening who maybe is not familiar, what's a post-valuation query?
So basically, once the surveyors have actually been out to the property, if there is anything that, maybe they can't get all the information, then that will trigger from the conveyancer a query that comes through afterwards. And these can come 2 to 3 weeks, even a month down the line. Well, where the surveyor is concerned, they've actually moved on from that now. So if we can try and get a lot more information, it would actually cut down of those queries coming through.
And those PVQs is just another thing that's adding to the time it might take to buy or sell a house.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's usually the last thing and it's, we need to, complete by 12 o'clock today, but we need this answering. So it just puts undue pressure on everybody.
And Laura, from a residential conveyancing point of view, do your team find that they're having to ask more post-valuation queries because of the complexity and changing legislation and stuff?
Yeah, I think that can be the case. So we'll always try as much as we can refer to the handbook for lenders and making sure that we're following all of that. But generally, if it's complex or it's not very clear, of a ground rent cap or potentially a piece of a basement or something that's not included in the plan, but actually has it been valued as part of it, we don't know. And making sure those inquiries are sent over, because ultimately we need to make sure that the lender would be satisfied and valued on the correct building. So we are finding sometimes, we as a team will look at it and think, is it necessary? But sometimes it is, unfortunately. Yeah, we do have to.
And as I understand it, it's more challenging, isn't it? Because different lenders will have different things that they're going to ask.
Yeah, that's right. And we sign up, so we get notifications of when certain lenders change their rules, and it's updated. And we've noticed quite frequently it's changing. I think there was something recently on Common Hold where it was had to be made absolutely clear that it's not something that they're going to consider right now, and just making sure you're on top of it. And you may have raised the inquiry with the lender, but then it could have changed by the time you've raised it and haven't had an answer. We're noticing that quite a bit.
Mm. And Emily, you've mentioned there that things keeping you and your team busy, people and legislation. If we sort of break that down into sort of specific challenges, what do you find, both you within Burns Hamilton, but perhaps also the wider block management managing agent industry? What are the big challenges you're facing at the moment?
I think the biggest challenge is, for me, it's AI, and that comes in two ways. That there seems to be a lot of pressure to use AI and then to find the right solution for the business of how do we implement that, what are the costs, what's the best one to implement, because very recently everyone was, oh, it's all ChatGPT, and now it's, oh no, now it's Claude. And that, for me, in my role, creates quite a lot of uncertainty of, well, do we go with that solution, or should we be waiting to see what other solution we go with? And then the dangers of how that gets used across a business as well, with people using ChatGPT to help with drafting some of the responses and maybe not giving it that human check that it really needs. But I feel that across the industry, I've seen that complaints seem to be increasing. And the types of complaints that we're getting are drafted by AI. And AI is now encouraging raising queries that perhaps those that are raising them don't fully understand. And that's creating a lot more work for managing agents. And so we're really trying to get to the bottom of what is the underlying query that you want answered, and let's address that. But it's now picking it out from a very, very lengthy, convoluted document, which for those that are more junior in the industry find very intimidating. And even when I get some of them, I look at them and I'm like, what are you actually trying to ask? I don't understand. So I think a lot of people talk about the benefits of AI, but I really see it as a challenge of, like, from a business perspective, which solution do we go with? How do we use it properly? But also the communication that we're getting in from leaseholders, because there's so much mixed messaging in this new legislation, the media's perception of block managers, not really knowing what it is that we do. They're turning to AI for help and for answers, which sometimes I feel is taken as a better answer than an experienced individual professional gives. And so I feel that that's a significant challenge, but I would anticipate that pans across not only the property industry, but much wider as well. That's probably a national challenge that we're facing.
It was certainly, I was talking to a lawyer a couple of days ago who specialises in defending professional indemnity claims against property professionals. And she was saying they've seen a marked increase in litigants in person who are using AI to form the basis of their allegation. And she was picking up on much of what you said, Emily, that quite often the complexity of the language means that you've got to spend a long time just staring at what's written to understand what the actual underlying problem is.
Go back to picking the phone and talking as well.
Yeah, exactly. Lynn, you and I were talking earlier today about sort of technology. I think there's a perception, isn't there, that out there somewhere as this amazing, all singing, all dancing system that's going to make all of our lives easier. But the reality is, even if that exists, actually bringing it in requires quite a lot of change in practice. And I know, I mean, the surveying industry, Lynn, in the last sort of 15 years has really, residential surveyors particularly, have started to use a lot more what I would call tech platforms, more data. Is it as easy as everybody thinks it is to introduce new tech, Lynn?
Not at all, no. It's pretty, what the surveyors need is pretty simple. They go out with, iPads. There is always a fear of having too much distractions, that type of thing. We've just upgraded. And yeah, I know the end product is probably, it is going to be a lot better, but the challenges all the way through is really quite difficult. And it does actually put sort of a lot of strain on, the admin staff, the surveyors. But yeah, I think the end result, and I think that's what's actually keeping me going, is it will get better. It will get better. And we know it does. Whatever we introduce in terms of tech, it will get better. But I think, the end product hopefully will then be able to see the data sharing a lot easier, and be able to get that upfront information as and when needed.
And Laura, what challenges are you and your team facing? And there's a huge amount of tech solutions thrown at the legal industry. Do you experience the same challenges in terms of picking what to use and what not to use?
Yes, at the moment, we are looking at what we can and can't use. We're regulated. You have to make sure what you're using is correct. And at the moment, I'm not using anything like that, but we are seeing clients drafting and sending things over, which they're trying to find out as much as they can from information that they want us to answer. And they will say, oh, I found this on an AI, platform. Can you elaborate for me? But obviously we want to then go back to the laws and what's available in terms of guidance for ourselves. And so I'd say at the moment, we're not noticing it in the same way. But it's definitely something I think that law firms are going to need to think about and consider in terms of the administration generally and support and getting things over. I think residential generally is a fast pace, so people want things done quickly and efficiently, but sometimes you just need to sit down and use your legal mind a bit better.
Yeah. And what other challenges are you seeing, Laura? If there was one thing that was sort of, I guess, keeping you awake at night at the moment, what is that?
Yeah, I actually feel like my answer is going to be so repetitive for including all them, and contradictory. So it is the legislation, certainly for again enfranchisement. It's a challenge because we want to try and tell clients, you can do it this way. This is what you should, but we can't. It is all based on their situation and what works for them. So it's hard navigating that for them, and I would say it's frustrating at times that we can't deliver what we want to our client. And I guess they're more cautious. They're also really informed, going back to the AI. They will research things, come back to us and ask us what we think. So I'd say that can be quite tricky in that aspect. And again, with transactions, making sure that everything is what it should be. We don't want things to fall apart in the transaction because something's come up because the reforms say this. So now a purchaser doesn't want to do it or ask for more money in the transaction or money off. So yeah, it's definitely a challenging time for uncertainty, I guess, for us and certainly for enfranchisement.
And Lynn, when your team of surveyors are going out to value a property, does what's happening with leasehold and leasehold reform cause them any challenges when it comes to the actual valuation? There's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about leasehold falling in value because people are so concerned about it. Is that something that you're seeing, Lynn, on the ground?
I don't think so at the moment. I think basically it is, there is a challenge anyway in terms of leasehold property, short leases, if there's anything onerous in the lease, that sort of thing. So I think, it is at the moment quite a challenge. And again, it's understanding what those challenges are in terms of, I suppose, in relation to the property and getting that transaction through.
And Emily, how does what's happening with the uncertainty about whether somebody should enfranchise or not, should they wait, how does that affect you as managing agents?
It can create frustration if you've got a group of engaged leaseholders, but they don't own the freehold, and perhaps they don't even have any management powers. They want to move forward, but they can't get enough interest. There's maybe leaseholders who say, oh, we'll wait and see what's coming down the track because it's maybe going to get cheaper, it's maybe going to be different. And then that creates frustration for those that really want to get involved. And it creates a lot of difficulty for us as managing agents because we have our clients who we're answerable to, but then we have also very passionate leaseholders who want to get involved, and we want to work with them, but we can find ourselves torn between two parties wanting completely different things.
And how do you, I mean, look, there's lots of situations where that can happen at work. Do you have any top tips for how to be the strong party sat in the middle rather than feeling like you're being pushed on both sides?
I think you always feel like you're being pushed, and it's just trying to step back from it, see both sides, and then try and mediate that conversation or that difference of opinion to kind of say, okay, well, is there a middle ground that we can reach? Or if we have to actually just go with what our client is saying, how can we explain that to the other party in the best way so that they can understand this is not no, this is no because, and let me give you some context around it so that they can feel more informed, not just blocked.
I think it's your response very succinctly highlights one of the many challenges of being a managing agent. Lynn, just thinking about challenges, are there any particular issues that your team is seeing in properties that cause challenges at valuation? I'm thinking things here like spray foam insulation. I mean, I guess Japanese knotweed sort of had its day. Perhaps that's gone away a little bit. But anything that your team is seeing that can cause a challenge when it comes to the lending valuation, or indeed a condition report?
I think all of these things still, we still get Japanese knotweed coming up. We still get, in terms of the spray foam, I think, the challenges that we face, the lenders, jump on these things quite quickly. And, basically, is it something that they will or will not lend on? But obviously, these are things that the surveyors have to take on board. I suppose walking up to a leasehold property, if it's a block, is it well managed? There's all of these sort of things. It's, I suppose, really where the surveyor is concerned, it's not about just valuing that property now. It's about what is around them. So it's, the block, is it poorly maintained, or, is there, money going into it to actually bring it up to standard? So I think there is a number of factors that the surveyors have to face, which they probably didn't beforehand. And I think that comes back to, where the AVMs are concerned, the lenders will do a lot more of those on, I suppose, your less riskier properties. So, when the surveyors go in, nowadays they don't know what they're going to face. So, there's a number of things that they have to take on board. And again, they're the eyes and ears of the lenders. So it's even who's at that property, should they be at the property, is all of those sort of challenges as well, to be honest.
Are AVMs used a lot on leasehold? And I'm thinking here sort of on flats, Lynn, or do they tend not to be put through AVMs now?
I think some of them will put them through. I think we are on one of the major lenders' specialist panels for leasehold, along with a couple of other firms. I think it really depends. They go through stress testing. The lenders' models are pretty good now, and they'll usually fall out. So yeah, we do get a fair amount of them. And there's probably not a great deal that is actually being valued
that's
on AVMs.
And turning now, and I would encourage our audience, if you have any questions at all, please put them in the chat, or feel free to put your hands up. And if you haven't responded to our polls, please do so. We're trying to sort of track how everybody's feeling over the course of the year, and at some point we will start to report back on it. So this is just very, very general questions about what you think are going to happen with activity levels and how you're feeling personally. But turning now to sort of opportunities, Emily, I think it's a challenging time for managing agents. But what do you see as the sort of, for business of your profile, Emily, what do you think the opportunity might be over the course of the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging for managing agents, but I think it is challenging for everybody. So I'm not going to hog the limelight on that one. But I think that there is a huge opportunity, and I would love to hear something in the King's speech tomorrow about regulation of property agents. It was talked about that in the consultation on leaseholder protections that managing agents should be qualified. Certainly agree with that, and I think most of the industry do. But I would love to see it go one step further and say that we really need to be regulated, because one of the troubles that we have is that we take on properties from other agents time and time again, and it's nice because it's so easy for us to make a good impression. We had one the other day that was like, oh, you've sent us a draft budget, but we always had to do that for our previous agent. For us, that's just bread and butter what we do. So I think it's the opportunity is there for those of us who are qualified and have the expertise to really let that shine. And for our business, if we're in a bit of an adapt or die feel, we're very good at adapting because of the size that we are, and we've got all this legislation, and we can kind of pivot and look at how we can change our service, enhance our service to be able to deliver to our clients. And I think the opportunity is there for all of these qualified professionals who are doing it properly to see some of those who are harming the market by not doing it properly move away, and ultimately result in better managed buildings, which should help the rest of the industry then progress onwards more smoothly as well.
How amenable do you find both your clients? I think you manage a lot where they're right to manage, don't you, Emily? Am I right in saying?
Yeah, we've got 70% of our portfolio is resident-led companies, either right to manage or RMC.
And are you finding that residents and RMCs are increasingly open to the idea of you providing a quality proposition, and there is a price to pay for that? Or do you still have a hard job articulating the value that a managing agent brings?
It's difficult. There are some clients who definitely appreciate the service and they look at the responsiveness and the expertise that you have, but there are some that will simply look at cost, and they will phone and say, I've got a block of 20 flats, what will you charge me? And we can't provide a price like that because we need to know more about the building. Block of 20 flats, it could be anything. So we need to know more about the building, and it's trying to get those clients to a position to understand what it is we're offering and why our price is as it is, and why we can't just say, yeah, it's X amount per unit, because we need to look at the work that's involved, and we try to ensure that our clients understand the work that's involved as well.
And Laura, I know historically the conveyancing industry has on occasion struggled to articulate value and charge the right fee for the expertise that's going into a transaction. Is that still something you're seeing as a firm now, or do you feel that people are, home movers more highly value the service you provide?
I think it does depend on the client. Sometimes you'll have a first-time buyer who wants to limit as much as they can where possible, but where transactions are more complex, you are going to have to change that retainer slightly and assess an additional cost for certain things. And I do think they're quite understanding on that basis. But I think if we're clear from the outset, then, and I think we do actually you have to assess your fees online now anyway, but it's still important to give them that information. And we think, if there is a complex situation, they might say, actually, I don't want to do this property sounds too complex for me, let me go for something that's a bit different. So it gives, yes, I think we are noticing that, but it gives them the opportunity to decide, do they actually want a property? Because where there comes more complexities in them, buying it, what's going to happen later down the line when they're actually
So again, I think something that's is intrinsic to being able to understand that complexity at the start is as much information as possible when you're taking on the instruction, which I know Lynn's mentioned as well in relation to the mortgage valuation.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is harder for us to do when we're acting for purchasers, because if we don't have that information, we only pick it up when PAC comes through. But for sellers, certainly, or leaseholders doing with franchisement, you want to pick up as much as you can at the beginning.
And what about opportunity for you, Laura? Where do you see the opportunity for either for your practice, or it might even be for you personally or for your team?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity is nice, as much as it's going to sound contradictory, because obviously the issues and the challenges around reform, it's still quite exciting, because I think it's put a bit more attention onto this area. Franchisement was always quite niche, and it's now coming into the residential field generally, and people becoming more aware of leaseholds and how structure works. And it's nice to engage with clients on that basis, which I find really nice. And it is a nice opportunity to not just process a file, but strategize with them and manage it, and give them a problem, solve it, and see what we can. And I think that's quite exciting. It kind of goes back to when you were learning law and researching in an area which you may have forgotten about back then, but actually it keeps you, I guess, for CPD as well generally, but it keeps you informed and engaged with your clients. And I do think that's a great opportunity. So we have plenty of work, both sides, residential and enfranchisement, because of all this as well. So I think it's a good opportunity for us as a team. Yeah.
And Lynn, what about opportunities for your team?
I think really there is. I think, whatever's thrown at the industry, I think, in terms of going back to, again, maybe to the AVMs, you then try to, it's what firm are we? So we do a lot of private work as well on home buyers and building surveys. So, and I think it's not overcomplicating that. And also in terms of the specialist world. And I think, the way things are going forward, I think there's always going to be opportunity, retrofit, looking at properties anyway, bringing properties up to standard and everything. So I think, there is a number of opportunities. It's just what way do we want to go? And I think that's what we're probably exploring a lot at the moment.
It's certainly, I've seen how the residential surveying industry has not pivoted, but has evolved and innovated over the course of the last 15 years in response to the fact that historically most houses, as they were going through a transaction, would have been valued by a surveyor. There would have been a physical inspection. I suspect now that's reduced to about 50% of instances. And I've seen, just like your team has, Lynn, surveyors increasingly specialising in specific areas or specific types of property, which then gives you the chance to really sort of show the value you bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think it just gives, in terms of the private work, because if you think now that there may not be a surveyor going into your property that you're actually going to purchase. And I think it was probably about 15% of the whole transactions that people actually get another survey done. So I think, then it starts to give us a little bit more time to actually inform those clients of actually what they're buying and actually have the engagement. And again, which is really what the surveyors are there for. It's not really a tick box exercise. They actually a lot of the surveyors I've got came into the profession because they actually like to look at buildings. They actually like to know what is happening in that building and where, if the defects. So I think it's, there's a place for the AVMs, but also there's still a place for surveyors to be going out there and doing what they enjoy.
I think there's quite a lot of commonality across all of your responses there. Laura, you've emphasised that the complexity now enhances the need for that developing strategies around problem solving. Emily, you've talked about the value that you can bring to RMCs, where they want that, better quality service with a real focus on maintaining the building and their experience. And Lynn, you've articulated how that's playing out in terms of opportunity for surveyors who actually want to be on the ground looking at buildings rather than sat at their desk looking at rows and rows of figures. Slightly different question now. We often at these events, both our online events and our in-person events, we get quite a lot of people who are quite new to the industry. Laura, coming to you first on this one, what advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out in the residential property industry?
Firstly, take deep breaths. It's okay. It's all fine. But generally, trying to understand an entire transaction, it's very easy just to get caught up in that initial task and think, great, I've done that task and I can move on. But understanding the whole procedure throughout is really something that's worth looking at. And it's okay to ask those questions. As I said, residential is fast paced and everyone needs to get things done, but being able to deliver the best outcome, and maybe being able to achieve that by being quite thorough and maintaining attention to detail, knowing that from the, looking at that whole file and seeing it, I think that comes along the whole way. May not explain that well, but just knowing that, okay, I've done this part now, but what's going to happen next? Or did I do that because I need to do this next or in a few months' time? So just about attention to detail.
I think it's really, really good advice. Otherwise, I liken it to you're trying to build a car on a production line, but you don't know what happens before the car reaches you and after the car reaches you, and actually what the car's got to look like at the end of the process.
Yeah.
So I think
and you miss things otherwise as well. Sorry, I have to say you miss things otherwise. So yeah.
Emily, what advice would you offer to somebody who's just starting out in the industry?
Network as the biggest piece of advice that I can give, to be honest, because I started in the industry and I was 7 years before I actually got out of the office and met anyone. And I thought, this is a very niche job. I'm never going to get another job. I'm stuck here forever. And then I went and started networking and meeting people. And that's how I got involved with TPI and with FPRA and with WiRP, and just finding those other stories of everybody else having the same issues as you, the same struggles, widening your perspective about the whole industry. And exactly like you say, Laura, seeing the whole picture of everything. For me, it's just transformed what was a job into now a career, because I've got these amazing people around me that I know that I can call on for support, that I can support. And that's just to open my eyes to a whole new element of what was a job, like I say, to now be a career and a real passion for me.
Brilliant answer. Lynn, what advice would you offer?
Okay, where surveyors are concerned, I think it is still a challenging job. It's a challenging job, but I still think it's a very rewarding job. And I think really what I would say to any of the surveyors coming in, go for your chartership, but also look at what the opportunities are there. Look at the pathways. There's a huge wide range of different aspects that you can get into in terms of surveying. And I think moving forward, ask questions. You're never going to know everything from day one, even if you've got those qualifications. It's something that you're going to continue to learn. New things are going to come up all the way through. So I think it's ask those questions. And again, probably reiterating what Emily and Laura said, that see the whole picture, follow everything all the way through.
So, final question, and this is your chance to ask something. And this is, what would you ask of, it could be government, it might be a prop tech supplier, it might be another industry sector. So I don't know, Emily, you might have an ask of the surveying industry, who knows? But Emily, what is your ask? One thing you can ask for.
My ask is of government and media, stop being so bloody negative. I think there is a lot out there that managing agents are evil. We're here just taking money and doing nothing. When the reality is that the people who work in managing agents, they're there, they care about the buildings, they care about the people. They genuinely want to do a good job. They're trying to do a good job. They may be hampered by legislation and red tape that gets in our way, but we ultimately want to look after the buildings. We want to do the best that we can. And we do lose sleep overnight for not being able to give people in the building what they want, because we've got to charge them money, because we've got to pay for things, because contractors cost money. And just having over that, this always negative attitude of managing agents are ripping everybody off. Leasehold, you've got to not live in leasehold. If people don't live in leasehold, we're not going to have enough homes for people to live in. So it is not all doom and gloom. There is a lot of positivity to it, and there's a lot of maybe a little bit more education and knowledge needed to it. But it is just, my ask is please stop being so negative, because it's harming everybody, including the people in their homes, because they feel that they're getting a raw deal when they're probably not. I'll get off my soapbox now.
It's a very strong response and much needed. And I think one of the things that's come out, I think, during this conversation is that actually many of the challenges and the opportunities you face, there's a lot of commonality. And, we've seen the same negativity, I think, variously around residential conveyancing industry, but also residential surveyors. And I think there is, and this comes up on most of these calls, I think there is a huge need for us all to collectively keep talking about all the good that we do. And trust me, insurance brokers are in there somewhere as well, because we're one of the most berated professions as well. But we do a lot of good, and we do put people and help people remain in lovely houses, and that's a huge thing to celebrate. So Laura, what was your ask?
I feel like it's a bit repetitive and obvious, but we may get the answer tomorrow in the King's Speech. I don't know. But a definitive timeline on these leasehold reforms would be really helpful. I know we get these announcements and there's these predictions, but it would be so refreshing to be able to tell clients, yes, you can do this now, or what you should, or yes, it will be cheaper. And that would be really refreshing. Even when the 2-year rule requirement was removed, it was so nice recently to advise a client and say, actually, you don't need to worry about this now. You've got to buy your property, you've got a bit of time, and carry on. So yeah, definitely I'd say a real timeline. And I think we, as an industry, we can adapt to regime, and we follow the rules where possible. So I think these delays are creating hesitation, delays unnecessarily. So as long as we have some clarity, it doesn't have to be the outcome we all may want. We all may not agree with it, but just something so we can have a clear and stable framework, I would say, for where we're going next.
Yeah, I think stability and clarity is something that we'd all welcome in lots of different parts of our lives. Lynn, what's your ask?
I think really it's the industry as a whole to be able to sort of collaborate with each other, to be able to sort of get things through quicker, to get that information up front. I think, on your point, Emily, that, block managers are perceived as not very nice in the industry or trying to mess things up. I think surveyors get that very much so. It's always the surveyor's fault if the valuation's taking longer, or if the transaction hasn't gone through, because we're the last ones in those transactions. So it's almost, okay, well, that's what we're waiting on. So I think it's about sort of, collaborating together, getting that information that's needed. And I think it would just basically speed up the process, but actually sort of, be able to, for the surveyors to sort of move on quite quickly after they've done one of the jobs, instead of coming back in terms of, the post-valuation queries that can be quite tough at times, because, it's right at the end of the transaction. It's a lot more pressure on everybody. So, yeah, let's see what we can do about getting information that everybody needs up front as much as possible.
Thank you, Lynn. Actually, Lynn, just quickly on the post-valuation queries, because it was something I meant to ask earlier. Do you get the same sorts of queries over and over and over again on each property, or are they all very different? Or
mainly they're the same type of thing. You might get something else coming up, just the odd, maybe the wrong box was ticked or something like that. But no, most of all, it's usually sort of like, it's mainly the legal queries really, or the fire safety. So it's those sort of things that I think we could probably get a lot of those things up front beforehand to have those answers before the surveyors actually go out. It would cut down on a huge amount. You're never going to stamp them out completely, because there will always be something that comes up that somebody's not seen somewhere down the line. So yeah, they are frustrating at times.
Over to our audience now. Do we have any questions from our audience? Either post your question in the chat or you can put your hand up. So we've had Natasha. I would like to see reserve contributions made a statutory requirement for all leasehold properties, with a set minimum contribution amount, but subject to increases the landlord may require for essential maintenance works. Emily, what are your views on that?
I think they're very wise words from a very wise woman. I think that would be great, because the biggest argument that we end up having with our clients is we need to build the reserve. And I understand the client's point of view is that they want to try and keep the service charges low for all of the leaseholders. But actually, that not having the foresight to build the reserve for future projects then means that you're hitting people with massive demands. And I know that that's where a lot of the criticism has come from. No managing agent wants to send out a demand to a leaseholder for £10,000, £25,000. But if the roof needs fixed and a reserve hasn't been built up over years as it should have been, then yeah, that's what we're going to have to do. And when people don't then have the funds to pay those, it means the works are delayed for everybody. I saw someone put a message in LinkedIn kind of saying they'd paid their major works contribution, but others hadn't. So the works were being delayed. Is that normal? Yeah, very normal, unfortunately, because whilst we might encourage people that this is coming and you need to save, ultimately they don't really concentrate until the demand lands on their doorstep. And I would love to see mandated reserves. So if leases don't have reserves, that you can automatically start to contribute towards them. And I'd love to see more engagement from clients with getting CapEx reports and asset management plans, so that they can know what's coming in the next 10, 15 years and start planning for it. Not just finger in the air, oh yeah, 50 quid a leaseholder, that sounds like about right to build a reserve. Equally, you don't want to be holding £20,000 in reserve if your block doesn't need any work and you've only got 4 leaseholders. So it's having that weighing up and more concentration of planning those reserves. But yeah, would love to see it mandated.
I think the comment you make on the CapEx is really interesting, given Lynn's comments about the number of homes or the number of purchases where there's actually a physical inspection involved. And that becomes even more complex if somebody's buying a flat in a block, and the capacity of a surveyor to inspect an entire block, which could be a very complex building. And I'm guessing that this requirement could be a huge opportunity for the surveying profession to be going out and doing those assessments of condition on buildings to inform then the CapEx.
Yeah, and it would be great. There's got to be some sort of balance to it, though, because smaller blocks may not need the level of detail if they simply have an internal decoration, external decoration, pitched roof. Not a huge amount, but something with a lot of M&E, a lot of plant, multiple entrances, multiple safety systems. They're going to need a much more detailed plan to be able to know what they need to have available to them in terms of funds.
Any more questions from our audience? Okay, I'm going to ask each of you a question. And Emily, I'm gonna start with you. How as a business are you finding recruitment and retention at the moment, given the challenges that we've talked about on this call?
Recruitment is difficult because there are not a huge number of people who want to come into this sector. Retention, we do put our staff first, because my motto is you can't make a client happy unless you've got your staff happy. So they come first, then it's the clients, unfortunately, for them. But we try to do a lot of things in-house to kind of have a lot of social events. We had a sip and paint lunch where we did portraits of each other, which the results were hilarious. Just little things like that help to detract from those challenges that we have when we go and sit back at our desk. But it is difficult because everyone's trying to keep hold of their staff, and there is not a lot out there that when you do have vacancies, there's not a lot to pick from. So it is difficult, and I've seen so many people walk away from the residential property management industry into like surveying or other areas of the property industry where it's not client facing. There seems to be a real push for not having a client facing role at the moment.
And Lynn, traditionally the surveying industry has faced challenges. It's an aging profession, not the easiest profession, I think, often to recruit women into. How easy are you finding it as a business to sort of find surveyors and keep them?
We're finding it really, really difficult at the moment. We have got ads out there. At the moment, everybody seems to be recruiting. And then, basically, if, we have had some surveyors come, from other companies, but as soon as they get, okay, I'm leaving, then they come back with counter offers. So we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. At the moment, our own surveyors, they've been, a number of them have been with us a long, long time, and surveyors don't generally want to jump ship. They're not out there just looking at the higher salaries. With a lot of the old guys aren't, or ladies. So yeah, it is really, really challenging. And also, yeah, with lady surveyors, it's not through want of trying, to be honest. We've had some in the past, but yeah, we are open to, anybody coming in. But I think, there is a shortage of the surveyors in the industry as a whole.
And finally, Laura, recruitment, retention within your practice?
Yeah, so certainly in the residential team, we have a good support. We needed to grow. So when I've only been at the firm for 2.5 years, they noticed that there was a need for more specialists in enfranchisement to build on that with the residential team. So we're finding that you just to find the right people, it's nice to have a collaborative team. We have a good retention across the board of the firm. So a mix, really. It is a really mix. I noticed that we are predominantly a women in residential, certainly, for us in our team. It's nice to be able to have a mix, just, again, because commercial seems to be where you would see more of the male presence. So, but generally, we seem to be okay. It's great.
That is the end for today. Thank you very, very much to everybody who's joined us. If our speakers could just stay on the line for a couple of minutes, that would be fabulous. For everybody who's still here, we will be sharing a recording of this. You can actually access the recordings of all the market updates on our YouTube. That's it, on our YouTube channel. Diane will correct me if it's not YouTube and it's somewhere else, but I'm fairly sure it is YouTube. Or go onto our website and you'll find links out to that channel as well. Thank you. You've been a brilliant audience, but most importantly, thank you very much to Diane at Today's Media, who just makes all the magic happen. And Emily, Laura and Lynn, thank you for being fantastic speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.